Every once in a while, we have some sound problems. Every once in a while, we have a morning like this, where from the very first note of music that's played with the chanters through the affirmation reading, which was not consciously paired for our Sunday service readings, but sometimes it just happens, like it did today, where it's just perfect to be talking about soul expansion. I should have known what the affirmation was, but I didn't. And when Viveka Devi read it, I thought, how beautiful. And you know, just listening to Todd and Keshava play Home is a Green Hill, I was wishing the words were being projected up there, but then of course we might not have absorbed the music in the same way, which tells its own story. But one of the lines in the music is in the song, "But when I'm silent, free from all cares, I discover my homes everywhere." It's just this constant message in that beautiful whispers that was read, where it was silence. Jyoti just chose it so perfectly, and I wish I had the words, but it was, I'm going to get rid of every distraction in my life. I'm going to consciously do that. And then in that place of pure and utter silence, I will experience your light everywhere. That's basically paraphrased, not Master's beautiful poetry, but close enough in terms of meaning. So there's just this flow, and this reading itself is so beautiful. Swamiji just has really his way with words to put an image in our minds. So he's speaking of the mystery behind all of life. And he has this phrase that he says, a willingness to seek the underlying reality behind appearances is essential for those who would know God. A willingness to seek the underlying reality. Everything that was read or played today just said in this mysterious way, what we see is not reality. We have to be willing to seek this underlying reality. I had this wonderful, although, well, I'll tell you the story. Forget my commentary. I was reading a book a couple of nights ago. It's a historical fiction book about Ireland, and it's wonderful. I'm just in one of the moments of loving reading about Ireland. But that aside, there was a wedding that was going to go on, and two sides were warring about what music should be played. And without telling you the whole story, though it's fascinating, one of the sides was arguing that the piece of music that should be played at the wedding was Joni Mitchell's song, Both Sides Now. Now, I'm trying to look around to see how many of you were both old enough to remember the song and also from the right culture to remember the song. But suffice it to say, whenever she wrote it, 60s, probably in the 60s, she was 22 years old, and it was hailed as a masterpiece. People were saying, people doubted that she wrote it because they felt it was so, they didn't use this word, but they felt the inspiration. I will just read a couple of the words to you in a moment. And then other people were saying, where else can she go after that? Well, everybody was wrong. She did open to the inspiration, and she did a lot after that. But I started thinking about the song, and I thought, why would they want that song at the wedding? Because in the 60s, when I was in love with folk music and wanting my heart to be torn and touched and moved, And there was a lot of beauty about folk music, but that was part of it. In some ways, because it was speaking the truth. And Joni Mitchell, in these words, basically says, she talks about clouds and how much all of the different aspects of a cloud that you can plug into. And as Jyotish wrote in his blog a couple of days later, so I'll just read you, rose and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air. She's describing clouds. It's so sweet and lovely, and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way. Then she says, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. And the final line in the next stanza is, I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's clouds' illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. And the song goes on to talk about life that way and love that way, always closing with, I've looked at life from both sides now. I don't know anything about life. I've looked at love, both sides. I don't know love. So what is she describing? She's describing the ego's hold on us and the complete inability to see with great clarity that which is actually around us. Hence Swamiji's beautiful words of willingness to seek the underlying reality. Now, I didn't think that song should be at a wedding because Joni Mitchell was basically saying, it's too hard. You're never going to get clear. And I sat with that. Then that night, I drove home I was in Yosemite. I drove a friend to Oakland. Then I had to turn right around, it was late, and drive up to the village. And so I'm driving up to the village, and I thought, I'll just see if there's a radio station. And I find a quote-unquote oldies station, and what's the first song that comes on? Both Sides Now. I couldn't believe it. Then I check into this little hotel in Auburn. It's very late, set my alarm clock for 4 in the morning, because I was going to go up to the village to get Jyotish and Davy and drive them to the airport. And I read Jyotish's blog. And what does he talk about in the blog but Joni Mitchell's song, Both Sides Now? Now, I said to him later, and this is his words. I'm not going to read my whole sermon, I promise you, but some things just can't be paraphrased. He says, when we are caught in the labyrinth of our ego, we see only a very distorted reality, filtered through the lens of our moods, desires, and attachments. The distortions of the mind, due to the turbulence of the heart, are depicted beautifully in this song. Now, he says much more, and I encourage you to read it. It was an extraordinary blog talking about why we need to have this willingness, this desire, this fortitude to keep diving under, deeper in, away from the illusion and delusions of what's going on. But I thought to myself, what made that happen? How could that be that it shows up in this book about Ireland, it comes on the radio, and then Jyotish, who I thought would have never heard any of this folk music, writes this beautiful, spiritually deeply meaningful commentary on it. And, I mean, who can explain those things? There's something mysterious about it. It's not ultimately the song, as I said, that uplifting, though I did play several versions of it yesterday, and it's still very big. There's something about it, it just gets you, it's beautiful. But actually for us, it can awaken us to what we need to move beyond. But on that ride late at night, it brought to mind for me all of the ways that different people have come upon the path. Because I was already struck that I read about it and then heard it. Little did I know that Jyotish was going to write about it. And I thought, how do those things happen? And I was just thinking about the beauty of how we come on the path. And this is really the truth. I had not read the reading yet. This was late Thursday night. I didn't really know what we were going to be talking about today. But I thought, there are such mysteries in life, in the way things happen. And this story came to me about Bharat and how he was brought onto this path. Now, I've asked, I think at this point, without exaggeration, at least 100, if not a couple of hundred people, about how they found us. It's the first question I ask anybody. If you're relatively new here and you've met me, I've said to you, how did you get here? What made you walk in? Because it's always fascinating. And there's always that mystery that the wind's blowing, but we don't see its source. We don't know how these things happen because we're trying to figure it out. And of course, we can't figure it out. So I was reminded of Bharat's story, which is, many of you may know Bharat, but he's a naturalist. He's written about nature. He's lived up at the village for decades. He's written many wonderful books. But when he was younger, in the 70s, he was a Boy Scout leader. And one day he was at a Boy Scout camp, and he had walked away from the camp, at least a 20-minute walk, he says, and he was sitting by a lake. And one of the Boy Scouts from the camp comes, and he sees him coming with a letter in his hand. And Bharat says, the last thought that was in my mind, the last prayer, my last heart's longing was I was saying to God, how should I serve now? How am I going to move forward in life? Show me my path. Those were his words. He was very young. And he sees this Boy Scout coming. Now, and this Boy Scout says, they asked me to bring this letter to you from the camp. Now, you have to keep in mind, this letter showed up at his mother's house, his home. She decided to send it to the office of the Scout Council, knowing he was going to be with Boy Scouts. They decide to take it to this Boy Scout camp where he is. Then this young boy walks 20 minutes, hands it to him. He opens the letter, and it's an advertisement from Ananda that had made its way. What is that? Who can even think about that? An advertisement. And his mother forwards it, and the council forwards it, and the camp forwards. And he just looks at it and he goes, oh, I see. And he went to Ananda, and he's been there ever since. How can we make sense of that? We can't. We have to do what we've been reading about, listening to, hearing about, to be able to imagine the greatness that exists. And, I just came to mind this story about Yogananda. He wrote a lot of chants called Cosmic Chants. And one day, Swamiji says, I think it was Mount Washington and not Encinitas, it doesn't matter. He was in one place, and he was listening to people play and sing these chants that he had just written or received and put out there, and they were singing them. And he was flowing on the green and just in a state of ecstasy, I'm sure. And all of a sudden, I don't remember what chant it was, but he turns around, and of course, wherever he was, a little crowd would develop, and he turns, and from this state, looks at them, and he says, I see all of you as beautiful light. And he says, you have no idea how beautiful you are. He meant those words. You don't know who you are. And he went on to talk about, in other places, the nature of the human condition. He said it's like taking 1,000,000 cubic feet of air and compressing it, which you can do, to 1 cubic foot. And he said that's what we've done. We've put this infinite supply of energy, of joy, of wisdom into this body and this mind, and we try and work it out. We're always fixing things, moving things, figuring them out, trying to solve life's problems in just the way that we can't. And he said, if you find the way to let go of the egoic attachment, because we're also attached to it. I mean, we really are. This is so crazy. I am about to be 75 years old. This body is of no real use to me. I don't use it in any, well, that's not true. I did just hike in Yosemite, and it's a good body. It gets me around. But, you know, in terms of focusing a lot on what it looks like, look, it's just not where I am. But I had to have a passport picture taken yesterday. And you've all had passport pictures taken. I mean, is there ever a good passport picture? But the man says to me, he's working on it. He said, do you like this or you want me to take it over? That should have been my clue. I said to him, whatever it is, just use it. Then it comes out, I was with Lakshmi. Her picture is gorgeous. I'm like, ask her to show it to you sometime. Mine, my mouth is all pursed and ugly. And I get into it. I'm saying to Lakshmi, should I, this picture is probably going to be with me for the rest of my life. Should I take it over? I mean, how crazy is that? We are attached to these bodies. Suddenly, I felt so foolish. This is an Indian couple that runs a business. I was quickly looking around for Ganesha because I was sure he existed. Please remove all of these obstacles. Who cares about my mouth? I mean, it's just nuts. But Master says we're all like that. And if we let go of it, it's like opening up the container with the compressed air, and it goes back. It becomes infinite. It's just soul expansion. It's exactly what we were affirming today. This was so relevant. Use that affirmation all week. Remember it. It's these absolutely beautiful words. Swami Kriyananda said, if there weren't avatars and teachers, none of us we would never be free. That we wouldn't even know how to become free. We wouldn't even think of it. But they come. What extraordinary grace. They come repeatedly in every religion, in so much wisdom, writing, music. I mean, the question, does God hide the truth? It sort of answers itself. No, it's not God hiding the truth. It's that we have not learned how to see it yet, how to receive the truth. There's a wonderful story that I've heard several times. I don't remember, but it's probably from Bharat, because it sounds like a Bharat story at least one of the times, about in India. I think this is true, but if it's not true, maybe somebody knows. Doesn't matter, it makes the point. How they train parrots to talk in India is that the trainer stands behind a mirror. So the parrot's looking at a mirror, thinking that it's a parrot teaching him how to talk. So he learns to speak English or Hindi or wherever the parrot is, right? I mean, it's extraordinary if you think of it. What a clever way to do that. So it's learning how to be a parrot, not the way we train it. Well, actually, we're exactly like that with our guru. We look at our gurus and we think they're human, like us. And we assign them all of those qualities. No, they're not like us, but they come dressed like us so that we can notice them, so that we can listen to them, so that we can move into that ever flowing grace, that state of Om, which exists not just forever, but in everything. We are that. There's nowhere to go. And these gurus come and say to us, you are the wind, you are the river, you are the sound of the babbling brook, you're everything. Let me help you break all of the attachment that you have. It's just, and let me help you flow free with that grace. And all we need to do is listen, hear, make that, whatever Swamiji's statement was, the willingness to seek the underlying reality behind appearances. You know, it's not easy because, first of all, again, as I've said so many times, because Maya does such a great job of fooling us. Recently, I was talking to actually several people who were new here, people who are really interested. They came, they're loving it. But as some stories started coming out about some of the miracles, some of the joy, some of what this path is about, in some of those eyes, I could just see the glazing. Even sometimes when I'm with friends who are not on the path, it's just incomprehensible. So if you're working from here, you just go to sleep. Basically, it's what we've all done. We go to sleep. It doesn't make any sense. It's almost boring, except when your heart gets touched, except when somebody goes miles, hundreds of miles out of their way to bring you an advertisement from Ananda. Just think of your own story. I know it. I could tell you my stories. They do not make sense with the head. It's just like what Master wrote on the first page of the AY. Lest ye see signs and wonder, you will not believe. But here we are. We're all sitting here. When somebody asked Yogananda, how did Rajasi make so much progress so quickly? He said he knew how to listen. And if you listen to what Swamiji wrote about soul expansion, what Atmajoti read, the words to Home is a Green Hill, the vibration of that music, you will see that God is everywhere. Swamiji wrote a book by that name, but it's true. He's everywhere. We just have to open our eyes. We have to open our hearts. We have to be willing. And what's there to fight against? I mean, anybody who's had any experience of the divine at all, would you raise your hand and tell me it was awful? No, it's the most heart-opening, beautiful, being held. Swami Kriyananda says, Om, these are Swamiji's words, Om, which is the vibration that's created everything. We are all it. The music is it. Everything's it. Om is Divine Mother calling all who love her to come back to her. Isn't that beautiful? So that's why we listen for Om, literally. That's why we're trained. And when people say to me, oh no, I don't practice Om. Why not? Why would you not be practicing Om? If you hear it, you're with God. It's been made so simple for us. I'll just end with this commentary, really, not a story. But I mentioned that I went up to the village to get Jyotish and Devi to drive them back to SFO, which was, as far as I was concerned, one of the greater blessings of this year. I mean, just to be in that car with them for all those hours. What just beautiful souls, beautiful souls. Talk about willingness and soul expansion. But anyway, I said, we're ready, should we go? And Jyotish said, no, we can't leave yet. He said, because we told them we would be down at, I forget what they call that, but the bottom where all the roads merge at the village, for those of you who've been there, where that big Om sign is, at 7. So I didn't ask anything else. I figured he said they would be there at 7. Something happens. So we get down there, and I don't know how many people, 100, I'm not sure, but it was a lot. And they were just there in the road, just like this, all of them, and waiting for Jyotish and Devi, who of course got out of the car and blessed everyone. I mean, just said a few words, cracked a few jokes really, but, spoke to them about their trip. But it wasn't even exuding love. It was allowing God's love to flow through them. It was a beautiful morning. And I look out, because I didn't stay with Jyotish and Devi, but I come all the way over here to be out of all of the pictures that were being taken. And I just looked at those faces. These are people who have lived at Ananda village, many of them with Swami Kriyananda, every one of them dedicated to going deeper on the path. Have they all experienced samadhi? I doubt it. It's not that they're avatars, but they are saints in the making, and many of them highly evolved. And I looked out and I thought, oh my God, they're all angels. I am sitting here looking at an entire colony of angels. That is what that vibration felt like. And I felt so blessed to have all of that available to me, as does everyone here. Every one of us can plug into it and then look, be those angels. Henry David Thoreau said a very interesting thing. I'll take one moment, tell the shortest story about him, then I'll end with his quote. He went out for a walk one day, and he walked, I think it was about an hour, and he realized, Henry David Thoreau, right, this great naturalist, very spiritual man, that he had been thinking the whole time about his pencil business. He actually helped pencils become what they are. A nice contribution in and of itself. And he was so disturbed by that he turned around, walked back, and started his walk again, wanting to notice everything in nature, wanting to be present, wanting to absorb, wanting to see with different eyes, to listen with his heart, with divine ears. Isn't that just beautiful? That's what we want. We want to be that kind of present. And he said the most beautiful thing. He said, wisdom does not inspect, but beholds. And I thought a lot about that. What does inspection mean? You're judging it, you're fixing it, you're deciding how you're going to change it. You think of how you can make it better. That's what we do. I mean, let's be honest. It's a lot of what we do with a lot of our days. But beholding means we are uplifted, we're open, we're silent, we're receiving. I just spent less than 48 hours in Yosemite, but 4 of them were sitting on the shores of Lake Tenaya, high altitude glacial lake, sitting quietly, listening. 48 hours, not a long time, not a big, huge seclusion. It was transforming. That ability, that decision to stop and be silent and empty. If you read that, Whispers that Atmajyoti read, all of that just to get to that moment where we can actually have the realization of creation, of love, of divine friendship, but an experience of it. It's right there. We're so busy. Just let's get a little less busy. Let's not walk and think about our pencils, whatever they are. And in this very life, every one of us could find God. That is a promise from Master. He said that. We could, if we're willing, if we have the willingness to see beyond what is this illusion that we live in. God bless you all.